For years, Canada was a beacon of hope, a place where dreams of safety, opportunity, and belonging felt within reach. Newcomers from every corner of the globe arrived with hearts full of hope, eager to build new lives and contribute to a country that prided itself on diversity and inclusion. In bustling cities and quiet towns, immigrants became the backbone of communities, fueling the economy and enriching Canadian culture. That's why the government's sudden, sweeping tightening of immigration policies sent shockwaves across the country. The announcement came without warning, an abrupt reversal that left many reeling. Overnight, a door that had been wide open slammed shut. For thousands, the moment was surreal, like watching a bridge to their future suddenly collapse. The changes were immediate, rippling through families, students, workers, and refugees alike. In the confusion, many clung to their loved ones, uncertain if they would be forced apart. Ambitious targets for welcoming immigrants were replaced by aggressive cutbacks. The promise of a new beginning was replaced by a wave of anxiety and fear. Dreams of a new life in Canada, once so attainable, are now tangled in bureaucracy and uncertainty. Immigration lawyers and support groups are scrambling to help people navigate the new reality, working late into the night to answer desperate questions. This isn't just about numbers, it's about real lives caught in the balance. Each statistic hides a story of hope, sacrifice, and resilience. Hopes have been dashed, families separated, and futures thrown into question. For some, the pain is immediate and raw. To truly understand this shift, we must look beyond the headlines and see its profound human impact, especially on women and families, like Maria, who arrived in Canada with her 2 children, only to find the door closing just as they stepped inside. Their story is just one among thousands, each marked by hope, heartbreak, and the search for belonging. Canada's reset on immigration has brought a wave of sweeping policy changes, sparking debate and concern across the country. The government announced major cuts across the board, citing housing shortages and strained public services as key reasons. Permanent resident targets for 2026 were slashed to 380,000, a sharp drop from the previous goal of 500,000. Families waiting years for reunification now face even longer delays. Temporary residents, including workers and students, will be reduced to less than 5% of the population by 2027. Popular pathways like the post-graduation work permit are now restricted, leaving many in limbo. International student visas are now capped at 155,000, down from over 200,000 last year. With tougher financial requirements, students must now show proof of $20,635 in savings, double the previous amount. Work permits for foreign workers are harder to get, and spousal work permits for most students and workers have been eliminated, leaving families separated and employers struggling to fill jobs. Refugee admissions were cut by nearly 12,000, and new laws will make asylum claims tougher, raising fears among those fleeing danger. These sweeping changes signal the end of rapid, large-scale immigration growth and have left many families and communities uncertain about their future. Canada's new message, restriction and selectivity, now shape the path for millions, as individuals and families grapple with the real-life impact of these historic changes. The government's abrupt action was triggered by a convergence of political, economic, and social pressures, each intensifying in recent months. Record-high population growth put unprecedented strain on housing, healthcare, and essential services, echoing past periods of rapid immigration in Canadian history. Soaring rents and long wait times fueled public frustration, reminiscent of the 1970s when similar pressures led to policy slowdowns. Economic anxieties deepened as the cost of living rose, with experts warning that unchecked growth could widen inequality and destabilize communities. Politically, the stakes were high. With an election on the horizon, leaders faced mounting pressure to demonstrate control and responsiveness. Political analysts note that governments often recalibrate immigration policy before elections to reassure voters and counter opposition criticism. By framing the changes as a reset for sustainability, officials aim to restore public trust, drawing on strategies used during previous policy resets. Experts argue the immediate impact, a sharp slowdown in newcomers, offers a temporary reprieve for strained services, but risks long-term consequences for growth. Ultimately, this high-stakes gamble, while politically expedient, has upended thousands of lives, raising questions about the balance between public sentiment and Canada's long-term needs. These new rules don't affect everyone equally. Women are hit hardest. According to a recent study by the Canadian Council for Refugees, over 60% of those impacted by the new restrictions are women, many of whom are already in vulnerable positions. Women are more likely to use the pathways most restricted, like international students, caregivers, or spouses of temporary workers. Experts warn that these changes will have ripple effects for years to come. Eliminating open work permits for most spouses strips many women of economic independence. One woman, Priya, shared that she lost her job offer after her permit was revoked, forcing her to rely entirely on her husband's income. Now, many are financially dependent on their partners, increasing vulnerability and power imbalances. Experts say this can trap women in unhealthy or even abusive relationships. For women in unhealthy relationships, leaving could mean losing their home, income, and status. A shelter worker reports a spike in calls from immigrant women desperate for help but afraid of deportation. Cuts to family reunification and refugee intake also hit women and children hardest, prolonging painful separations. For many, the wait to see loved ones now stretches into years, with lasting effects on children's mental health. For those fleeing violence, the door to safety is now even narrower. Experts warn that these policies could put lives at risk, especially for women escaping abuse or conflict. Though the language is neutral, the impact is profoundly gendered. Without urgent changes, advocates fear the long-term effects will be felt for generations, deepening inequality and silencing women's voices in Canada's future. For many young women, Canada was the path to a better future, one filled with hope, ambition, and the promise of new beginnings. Education, work, and a new life seemed within reach. Like Priya, who dreamed of becoming an engineer, or Fatima, who hoped to support her family back home. The sudden cap on student visas and tougher financial rules have shattered these dreams. I spent years preparing for this, shares Priya. Now, everything feels lost. Students who planned for years now face slim chances and higher barriers. Fatima says, "My family invested everything for my education. I don't know how to tell them I might not go." Work hour limits and loss of spousal work permits have upended family finances and plans. "We were building a life together," says Maria, a mother of two. "Now my husband can't work, and we're struggling." Married women and mothers are especially penalized, as their families can no longer support themselves while they study. "I feel guilty for bringing my family here," confides Aisha. "We're barely making it." The once clear path, study, work, settle, has become uncertain and fragmented. "It feels like the road just disappeared," says one student. For many, the dream isn't just deferred, it's cancelled. "I don't know what's next," whispers Fatima, wiping away tears. They're left to pick up the pieces, facing a future far more uncertain than promised. For these women and their families, the cost is not just financial, it's the loss of hope itself. The new policies are tearing at the fabric of immigrant families, leaving deep scars that go far beyond paperwork and wait times. Longer waits for family reunification mean mothers and daughters are separated for even more agonizing periods. For some, birthdays and graduations are now witnessed only through flickering screens, with hugs replaced by pixelated images and tearful goodbyes. The emotional toll is immense: missed milestones, constant anxiety, and isolation. One mother, Maria, describes the ache of hearing her son's voice over the phone, knowing she can't comfort him when he's sick or scared. Another, Aisha, keeps her daughter's room untouched, clinging to memories as months turn into years. Women, often the primary caregivers, are caught between responsibilities in Canada and loved ones abroad. The pressure to provide for family back home while building a new life alone leads to sleepless nights and overwhelming guilt. Removing spousal work permits forces many women into financial dependency, erasing hard-won independence. For Priya, who once managed her own business, the inability to work has left her feeling invisible and powerless, her dreams put on indefinite hold. Families now struggle to survive on one income, adding stress and vulnerability. Children sense the tension, asking why their parents are always worried, why treats and outings have disappeared. Dependency increases the risk of exploitation and abuse, trapping some women in precarious situations. Social workers report a rise in calls from women who feel they have nowhere to turn, their isolation deepened by language barriers and fear of jeopardizing their immigration status. The policy, meant to manage numbers, has weakened the resilience of immigrant families. The sense of community and hope that once sustained newcomers is now replaced by uncertainty and despair. Many women now find themselves more vulnerable than ever before, struggling not just with separation, but with the loss of identity, confidence, and the very sense of belonging that once gave them strength. Canada was once a lifeline for those fleeing war and persecution. In 2023, over 100,000 refugees applied for asylum here, but only a fraction found safety. Cutting refugee admissions by 12,000 is a devastating blow, especially for women and children facing unique dangers. According to the Canadian Council for Refugees, women make up nearly 50% of claimants, many fleeing gender-based violence. Fewer families can escape violence, and waits for resettlement grow even longer. One Syrian mother, Amina, has waited over 2 years to reunite with her children, now stuck in a refugee camp. New rules make it harder to claim asylum, adding stress and uncertainty for those who reach Canada. Immigration lawyer Sarah Ahmed says, "We're seeing more rejections and longer delays, especially for vulnerable women. For women who've survived trauma, navigating a tougher system can be overwhelming." Maria, a refugee from Honduras, shares, "I escaped violence, but now I fear being sent back." The message: Canada's compassion is shrinking, even for the most vulnerable. Experts warn that these changes could leave thousands in limbo, with the UNHCR reporting a global rise in displaced women and children. The human cost is measured in lives left in harm's way and families denied safety. For every story of hope, there are many more of heartbreak. The path to refuge is now steeper and more uncertain. For thousands like Amina and Maria, the wait for safety continues. These changes aren't just numbers. They're real lives disrupted, dreams deferred, and futures put on hold. Families sold homes, quit jobs, and took on debt, trusting Canada's promises. Some uprooted entire lives, only to find the door suddenly closed. Now many are stranded in limbo, their plans shattered overnight. According to advocacy groups, thousands have been left without clear answers or timelines. Some face losing their ability to work or stay, risking poverty and exploitation. For many, the fear of deportation is constant, and the stress is overwhelming. Advocacy groups warn of a rise in undocumented people, forced into the shadows and vulnerable to abuse. Statistics show a 30% increase in calls to crisis hotlines since the policy shift. Stories abound: workers facing deportation, caregivers separated from children, students unable to finish their studies, and families torn apart. The emotional toll is immense, with many reporting anxiety, depression, and a sense of hopelessness. These aren't abstract policy issues. They're personal crises, felt in every anxious phone call, every sleepless night, and every tearful goodbye. The true cost is measured in broken dreams, separated families, and profound anxiety, both visible and invisible. For every story we hear, there are countless more suffering in silence, hoping for a chance to rebuild. As the dust settles, uncertainty remains the new normal. But in times like these, our voices and actions matter more than ever. More policy changes could be coming, making it impossible for families to plan. It's easy to feel powerless, but every story shared and every letter sent can make a difference. Legal challenges are underway, but outcomes are uncertain and slow. If you're affected, consider reaching out to advocacy groups or legal aid for support. Community groups and embassies are stepping up to help those affected. You can volunteer, donate, or simply offer a listening ear to newcomers in your area. Canada's focus has shifted to attracting specific skills, ending the era of broad-based immigration. But together, we can advocate for policies that balance economic needs with compassion. Many who once qualified now find the door closed. If this is your story, don't give up. Connect with others, share your experience, and seek out new pathways. In this climate, personal stories matter more than ever. They humanize the debate and remind policymakers of the real impact. Share your journey online, with your community, or directly with your representatives. As these voices are heard, there's hope for a more compassionate, nuanced conversation about Canada's future. Together, we can push for solutions, like more transparent policies, expanded support for families, and fairer pathways for all. Your voice matters. Get involved, stay informed, and let's shape a future where everyone has a chance to belong.